I'm here today with Zineb BELYMAM, and we're going to talk about materiality assessments for the transport industry. Can you please explain what a materiality assessment is and why it is particularly important for the transport industry?
It's really important in the sustainability field to have this sustainability and the materiality approach. It will help organizations, companies, etc. a lot in this journey. As you said, materiality assessments, what it is? It's like creating a map for your sustainability journey. It will help you as an organization to figure out which environmental, social, and governance, which called ESG, issues matter the most to your business and your stakeholders. The main objective of this materiality is to have the perception of you as a company, as a business, and your stakeholders. So for the transport industry, this process is particularly important because it operates in the heart of several major sustainability challenges. For example, think about GHG emissions, think about urban congestion, think about energy efficiency, etc. Let me show an example. Imagine you are running a public transport company in a big city. A materiality assessment may reveal that what your stakeholder care the most. Is it reducing GHG gas emissions, or improve accessibility for people with disabilities, or ensuring, for example, passenger safety? With that knowledge, you can prioritize your efforts and the resources to make the biggest impact. So the transport industry faces unique scrutiny because it's directly tied to some of the world's most pressing impact issues, for example, climate change, air pollution, and community mobility, especially after COVID-19. A well-done materiality assessment ensures company to focus what really matters to them, and whether it's switching to electric bus, for example, or using some smart technology, or optimize routes, or reduce fuel consumption, using some renewable energy, etc.
What are the key elements of materiality assessments in the transportation domain, and how do these elements differ from other industries?
Stakeholder engagement, and it's the first element of materiality assessments as a key element. So when we talk about stakeholder engagement, what does it mean? This involves talking to passengers, for example, your first clients, to city officials, because as, for example, we are a public transport, so you are acting on behalf of city officials, suppliers, and even the communities affected by transport operations. For instance, a railway company may learn that local residents near to its track are most concerned about noise pollution, while passengers may prioritize on-time performance. So depending on stakeholder, this prioritization of matters can be very different. So first one is stakeholder engagement. The second one is impact on the environment. The transport sector is one of the top 3 sectors the most pollutant in the world, because it's a major contributor to carbon emissions. Assessments often focus on issues, for example, like transition on cleaner fuels, electrifying fleets, for example, and minimizing resource consumption. But we need to focus on our transport sector, what is the most important. For example, some airlines are exploring the SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. And the results of this assessment will help airlines companies to really reduce their impact on the environment. The third one gonna be safety and accessibility. What is too important to the transport sector is the safety of passengers. It's like the first priority. So the transport sector's success hangs in its ability to ensure safe, inclusive, and efficient mobility. Consider, for example, a bus company investing in wheelchair ramps and real-time route tracking. These efforts emerge from recognizing accessibility as a material issue. And even though in terms of business, you can add a new client to your business by making your bus accessible to this category of people. And the last one, gonna be technological innovation. This includes, for example, evaluating how new technologies, for example, such as autonomous vehicles or route or optimization software, etc., can reduce costs and environment impacts. the transport sector is one of the sectors that technology will help them a lot to succeed their sustainability journey. And when you say what this differ from other industry, why? I will say all the sector, for example, might focus on stakeholder engagement and environmental impact. But the transport industry has some very specific consideration. For example, in the manufacturing companies, materiality may focus on supply chain transparency or waste management. In finance, the focus gonna be, for example, in governance or on ethics. But in transport, materiality will take passenger safety, will take the ethic, will take suppliers, will take inclusive transport, will take environment, etc. So the transport sector has this approach, as we call overview approach, and you should take all these issues in your consideration.
Talking about regulatory frameworks, what are the major regulations or standards that transport companies need to consider when conducting materiality assessments?
A transport company actually may align their materiality assessments with the key international and regional regulation. For example, the first one is GRI, Global Reporting Initiatives. It's a widely used standard for reporting on sustainability impact, and it's one of the first standards published in terms of materiality. And even the UN recommend GRI for companies to be followed. It ensures that the material issues are identified and reflects stakeholder priorities. The second one, we can, for example, suggest the TCFD, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. It helps to identify climate-related risks and opportunities that can influence long-term financial planning in the transport sector. A third standard, for example, can be the ISO 14, which is related to environmental management system, and can guide materiality topics related to emissions and resource efficiency. Because in this ISO standard, it's focused on how you define what is the most significant for your activity. So when you define what is the most significant, at this time, you are analyzing what is priority. An example, a logistic company, we are in the transport sector, but the transport sector has a lot of some subsectors. For example, when we took a logistic company, it may focus on reducing fuel emissions due to, for example, the new regulation from the EU, which is also suggested by the GRI and the TCFD frameworks. So to sum up, I will say the first one gonna be the GRI because it's the most relevant and the most harmonized and the most concise for companies. After the GRI, you can use TCFD, ISO, or etc. But at least the GRI will be the one that helps you to achieve your objectives in the most efficient way.
How do international regulations like the EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, or the SEC's climate disclosure rules in the US impact materiality assessments in transport?
This regulation emphasizes the importance of identifying double materiality. In the recent years, we were focusing on materiality assessments, the importance of these matters to stakeholders and the management which represents the business or the company. But when we add this double materiality, what does it mean? Does it mean that when you ask your stakeholders and you ask the management, you should ask also them what is for you or according to you will impact the most the financial results? Because at the end, when we talk about this sustainability journey, the investors are one of the key stakeholders in this journey, and the shareholders and investors need concrete results. So when we were asking only the materiality, shareholders may say, okay, it's important, but it does not affect results, it does not affect the benefits. But when we add the double materiality, we need concrete results, how this matter can impact your results by the end of the year. For example, you can say, I will switch to renewable energy. But for example, you are in a country where renewable energy are not that affordable, for example. So to convince your shareholder is going to be very complicated. So this double materiality in CSRD will help company to convince the investors and to convince their shareholders that we are assessing our topics in terms of sustainability or ESG, but also we are adding what is the impact on results, etc. For the CAC, climate disclosure rules, this one is focused only on climate change and focusing on climate-related risk and financial implication. This one is like CSRD, but it's limited to environments. CSRD is including all matters such as social and governance, ethics, anti-corruption, suppliers, clients, etc. For example, for a company, let's say a rail operator in Europe under CSRD, may need to report on how they will transit from electric trains, not only lowers emission, but also reduce future dependencies on finance. So this idea of having this double approach, impact on ESG and stability and impact on finance, will help company to succeed this double materiality.
How are emerging regulations around ESG issues influencing the assessment of materiality in the transport sector?
I would say emerging ESG regulations are shifting the focus toward a proactive approach to identify risks and opportunities. For example, climate change. Regulations are pushing for low carbon solutions, such as electrification of fleet or investing in green hydrogen or renewable energy. The idea is that as a transport company, you have impact on the environment. So you need to know the most convenient solutions for you, depending on your subsectors, that will allow you to reduce your impact in the environment. We have on the other side, social factors. When we are talking about social factors, we have, for example, labor laws, diversity and inclusion, and for example, wages, health and safety, etc. All these requirements highlight the need for fair working conditions. And we have also governance. When we are talking about governance, we have all the anti-corruption laws and supply chain transparency. And these two subjects or these two topics are becoming increasingly material because we witnessed in the last years that many companies were involved in supply chain scandals. And for companies, especially operating worldwide, this subject is becoming more and more important. For example, a shipping company adopting to stricter carbon intensified targets may identify decarbonation as a top of this material issue. And in this way, when they will identify what are our investment plan for the 4 coming years, they will include this as one of their top priorities.
Let's talk a little about stakeholder engagement. How do stakeholders, like regulators, investors, customers, play a role in determining what is material in the transportation industry?
Stakeholders is the key to succeed your materiality assessments, even though you are in the transport sector or another sectors. But in the transport sector, stakeholders significantly influence your materiality because their priorities will help you to show what companies should focus on. Let's say regulators. Regulators set the legal and compliance expectation in terms of environment or social or governance. For example, emission standards or safety protocols, etc. Because when we are, for example, talking about public transport, the reputation of public transport will not affect only the company, but will affect all the actors of the city and the country. So that's why in the public sector, you are exposed more than the other sectors. And the public sector, even though you are a private company, you are provided what we call like basic needs of population, and which should be accessible, which should be safe, and which should be inclusive, etc. So you are not thinking about you as a company, but you are thinking about all your ecosystem and all the actors that may affect this reputation. So regulators are one of the pillar of this sustainability, this materiality assessments. Secondly, we can, for example, find the investors because in the sector, transport sector, it's one of the sectors that needs a lot of investments. So you cannot provide all your business by yourself. So you need a huge investors to help you to achieve your results. And for investors, there are many, for example, recently we have new regulations that are adapted to investors. So in this way, we will provide a clear information and clear action plan of your journey following the materiality assessment, so your investment can understand what you are doing. Because in the past, before this regulation with investors, we have like two approach. We have companies and organizations, and we have investors, and they don't understand each other because they have different language. These new standards and regulation for investors will help a lot of companies to provide investors what the information they need to get approved on their financial plan. And for the transport sector, I would say as the third one is customers. You are dealing directly with customers, and customers are demanding more and more sustainable and ethical practices. Recent studies show that customers, when they have the choice between a service or a product that can show more sustainable and ethical practice, they will go for the sustainable and ethical practice. So even though you are as a transport sector, you need to prove to your customers how you are committed to this. For example, green logistics or fair labor standards or health and safety, etc. So customers also are becoming one of the key that are determining what is material to your assessments. As an example, I will say public transport company may find, for example, emissions reduction material because regulators enforce stricter carbon limits, but investors seek climate risk disclosure. And you will say that customer will prefer eco-friendly transport options. So the idea is to identify for these three stakeholders what is the common between them and how we can prioritize these matters.
How can businesses gather input from stakeholders to conduct a successful materiality assessment for their transport companies?
Nowadays, we have many solutions. For example, the classic one and the most used one is surveys and questionnaires. We can provide with our stakeholders like a questionnaire or a survey, and we ask them. We can list all the topics by themes or by topics, for example, environment or social or client, suppliers, etc. And we ask them what is the importance that you find the most, for example, from a scale from 1 to 5. And they will provide their answers. So they will say, for example, for me, depending on the questionnaire, for energy efficiency as a customer, for me, it's 2. But as, for example, as a customer, for me, passenger safety is 5. And for example, as a shareholder, when they will ask the questionnaire, they will say, for example, ethics is 5 because it's the most important. And passenger safety also is 5 because an accident will impact the reputation of the company, and so on. The second one gonna be, for example, conducting an interview with some stakeholders. Some stakeholders may have some specificities. For example, past I did this project with companies for people with disabilities. I would say it's more preferable to have one interviews one-to-one. It's they will feel they are more committed to this project, and they will identify their needs. And they will not think as people with disabilities only, but as stakeholder of your company. We can also organize workshops with stakeholders. For example, one workshop with our suppliers. And we can also go, for example, for our suppliers, we can go for a workshop with some family of suppliers, and so on. The customers, we can do some workshop with customers. The idea is to say what is the specificities of my stakeholders and how can I have the most relevant answers from my stakeholders. For example, you have private companies operating in the public sector. All the official actors in the city, it's most benefits for you to have an interview with them, because the relationship is just a questionnaire or among just to have a call or etc. And we can close this canal by the last one is public disclosures. Some companies at the end say, okay, we want to reach a maximum of stakeholders, even though we don't have a relationship or partnership with them directly. So at this time, we say, okay, we define for stakeholder A and B questionnaire, stakeholder C and D interview, stakeholder H and I, for example, workshops. But we want to reach as maximum as we are having from stakeholders. So in this time, we can do what we call public disclosure. And this public disclosure, we will, for example, define online questionnaire. And we will use, for example, social media, or we can use, for example, our website, depending on the company. And we will ask all people, all stakeholders, they are affected with, or they know our company, or they know just the sector, not only the company. Please respond to our questionnaire, and this way they will have a maximum of response and answers, and they will prioritize the ESG matters depending on these answers.
How can transport companies balance the interests of different stakeholder groups when determining material issues?
Balancing different stakeholder interests requires, I will say, structured and transparent process. You need to identify what is your process. And when we are talking about your process, you need to define step 1, what it is, step 2, step 4, and step 5. It should be clearly defined before going to meet our stakeholders. For example, step 1, okay, why we are doing this? What is the objective of this? Is it for our shareholders? This is for our clients or customers? This is for internal purpose, etc. Or this is for some regulation, some CSRD, etc. So we need to prioritize and define our objectives. Depending on this, we will clarify our process. Secondly, we need to have transparent communication. Transparent communication is the key with this, because when we explain how decisions are made and how we will identify our stakeholders, they will allow us that the results gonna be relevant, and we will not have at the end some, for example, some conflict results or some contrary results, etc. Or for example, I witnessed some projects with the consistent results. Some stakeholders are saying this matter will be the first one. When you have clear communication, they will allow you to avoid all these inconsistencies at the end of the project. The third one, I will say, integration. You need to integrate all the key actors on these projects. It's very, very, very important to do this. You cannot, for example, say, I will choose some of the suppliers, I will choose some of the customers because they will provide some positive response. No. Or, for example, I will not include, for example, NGOs. Because NGOs are most of the time asking for this and they are negative, etc. No, it's a cliche, and we should not have this. When we are talking about integration, you should focus on your stakeholders, even though you are not satisfied with the results. But at the end, you need to have this overview results. And when you are defining your priorities based on all the responses from your stakeholders, at the end, you ensure that you have a credible approach. And you can convince all the stakeholders by the results you will have at the end of this project.
What are the unique material issues faced by the transport sector in terms of safety, emissions, infrastructure, and technology?
The unique material issues faced by the transport sector, safety is the first one for the past, for the present, and for the future. Ensuring passenger safety is very critical and important. And I will see that all the stakeholders will say the same. Even you are suppliers, you are customers, you are investor, you are NGOs, you are media, all types of stakeholders will place safety as the top one. The second one, I will say, in the environment, climate change, emissions. Recently, we are talking about Paris Agreement, we are talking about GHG, etc. I would say emissions, especially that the transport sector is one of the top 3, the most in terms of GHG emissions. So you need to think about how can I decarbonate my activities and make it as a priority. The third one, I will say infrastructure. Infrastructure will impact, on one hand, environment, will impact also the health and safety of your employees and your customers, and will help also to include the new technology. So infrastructure in one of the focus key in this sector. And the fourth one, I will say, with infrastructure, can be technology. How we can introduce new technology and how to be innovative.
How are the growing trends of digitalization and innovation in transportation, like autonomous vehicles, electric fleets, impacting materiality assessments?
Yeah, especially in developing countries. When you are visiting developing countries and other countries, you may see the gap. But let's talk about developing countries. This digitalization and innovation has a real impact on the transport sector. So I will say, for example, autonomous vehicles. This topic is becoming a really key material issue because your stakeholders are having more and more expectations from you. How the transport companies are including this. So you should include this. And when we are talking about electric fleets, for example, may solve some problems related to age, but we need to be holistic in our approach. Electrical fleets, yes, they solve the problem with GHG. What's the problem about batteries? Because nowadays we don't have some solutions for batteries. Batteries have many issues. The first issue, when manufacturing the batteries, when we are preparing the batteries, they are using some complex minerals, etc. And then using the batteries, and then after the batteries. The third one, I would say, data privacy. How we can increase our reliance on digital platforms, for example, GPS. This data privacy, how you can prove to your customers, etc., that you are respecting this data privacy. And the last one, I will say, efficiency gains. How can I include innovation in maintenance? Because when we are conducting a good maintenance, we can have our infrastructure that may last more years in use rather than if the maintenance is not relevant.
Moving on to talk about data collection and analysis. What types of data are essential when conducting a materiality assessment in transport, and how is that data collected?
The key type of data that should be collected, let's say, I would suggest to divide it into families. For example, in environments, I would say starting environments, clients, suppliers, employees and workers, and governance, we may split it into governance related to the board, shareholders, committees, and so on, and governance which is related to ethics, anti-corruption. So how we'll collect the data? When we start by identifying what this family that will identify, for example, customers. Customers, we need to identify what are the main topics that are related to customers. So when we identify, for example, these subcategories of data, at this time we start to collect the data. First of all, we start internally. Internally, we have, for example, like a department related to marketing, innovation, or customer experience. So I will have interviews with this team, asking them, do you know what are our customer expectations? What they need from our company, etc. So depending on this, I will identify what are the topics that I need to include in my materiality assessment. For suppliers, I will ask also the team of the departments related to procurement. And in this way, I will also identify. For example, I will ask what our suppliers are expecting from us, what the difficulties suppliers are facing with us. And the same thing for communities, the same thing for government, the same for environment. So internally, and I will add with this a benchmark. benchmark with some, for example, our competitors or some other actors in the sector that are known for their sustainability approach, etc. So this benchmark allows us to see if we are missing something. The third option, it's optional for companies, which is conducting some interviews with the key stakeholders to see if we find all the topics that are related to our sector. Some key stakeholders may help us, but in this case, this interview will just help us in collecting data and not starting the materiality assessments. When our topics are identified, then we start collecting data from our stakeholders.
How do you ensure that the data used in the materiality assessment is reliable, especially when it comes to complex or forward-looking issues like climate change?
Ensuring data reliability is very important. This needs to be done before starting the materiality assessment. Ensuring data, what this involves? The first one, it involves verification. We can have like a third-party auditors that validate emissions and sustainability data. The second one, you need to use some frameworks or standards that are known at international level, because these standards will provide you with guidelines. These guidelines in terms of data collection will help you to be consistent during the process of collecting data. The third one, scenario analysis. The scenario analysis are provided by some standards such as TCFD, and they are like tools for companies to ensure that the data are reliable and the data are accurate for the company. And the fourth one is not specified only for the transport sector, it's for all the sector. The sector is technology integration. We know that when the data are manual, the risk of errors is high.
Talking about risks and opportunities, how can a materiality assessment help transport companies identify potential risks that could affect their operations or reputation?
Risk and opportunities are in the heart of materiality assessment. And how this can materialize is, for example, when you conduct interviews with your stakeholders. In this way, you will ask them, in the environment, we have, for example, 5 topics. We have energy efficiency, we have GHG emissions, we have climate change, we have pollution. But your stakeholders at the end will say, and what about other topics you did not include? Say, like what? You will say, for example, like earthquake. This materiality assessment can allow you to know new risks that you didn't include before. This way, you will be sure that you have this overview of your risk and your opportunities. At the end, after the materiality assessment, you will adapt your action plan depending on this. I read many articles, many studies that many innovation from big companies are coming from their stakeholders. We should not take this materiality assessment just as a tool that they will just prioritize our topics in terms of ESG, but it's going to be great opportunities for companies to identify new risks and new opportunities for them.
What are some opportunities for growth or improvement that arise from conducting a comprehensive materiality assessment?
Actually, materiality assessments can uncover several opportunities. For example, operational efficiency. Identifying inefficiencies such as, for example, fuel wastage or maintenance gaps, etc., can lead to cost saving and reduce environment impacts. For example, innovation highlights, for example, trends like digitalization or electrification might guide investments in new technologies such as, for example, electric fleets or AI-based route optimization. We need to be very careful about this. We can say, okay, materiality assessments can provide me new information, but materiality assessment, it's not magic. It's gonna not change your approach, etc. It's like you are looking of your company in the mirror with different eyes. And as a company, I will need to check if these different eyes are positive or negative or neutral, and how can I have the most benefit of this. I need to check the positive, I need to check the negative, I need to check the neutral, and then I will decide, okay, what can I do now? This is the main objective of this materiality assessment. Materiality assessment is not here for just prioritize your ESG approach, but you can also provide some information that are very, very important. You just need to go through the best way and the best analysis and interpretation of the results.
What are some of the best practices for conducting a materiality assessment in the transport industry?
I will say the best practice, of course, engaging stakeholders. And engaging stakeholders, when you start your process, after the kickoff, etc., when you identify your stakeholders, you need to inform them before they prepare, because they also need some time to think about what they will provide you como responses. You will not send them the questionnaire at the beginning, but at least they need to have some critical thinking about this. So when you will ask them officially, they know what they will provide you as an answer. The second one, using international standards such as GRI, CSFD, SASB, etc. Because these standards is the results of many group discussions from many experts. When they provide the standards, it means that before they tested and they got some feedback, etc. For example, when we took, for example, GRI, the first version was in the early 2000s. Now we have like many versions. When we took the latest one, that means that they already experienced it and they provided with the maximum added value you can have. When you are using this international standard, it means that you are in the right way. The third one, I will say data analytics. You can use, for example, some digital tool to enter data, etc. But your interpretation is critical because the data tool or digitalization, technology, etc., will provide you with results. Okay, I have the results. I have the first topic, the second, etc., etc. But the results need to be analyzed. So this analysis of the results is one of the best practices because in the past I had some experience with companies. For example, we have like the headquarters based in Europe. And they have many subsidiaries based in many countries. The results may differ from country to country, and because they include some specificities related to their countries, related to their regulation, related to their customers, etc. So we need this interpretation and this analysis of the results. And the fourth one, double materiality. Double materiality, if you want to go to double materiality, if it's the first experience, double materiality can be complicated. If you are a beginner, start with materiality, just to understand the process, just to engage your stakeholders, etc. Like doing first test. Unless you are under CSRD, and this time you should start with double materiality. But if you are not required to start with double materiality, please start with materiality. Because either way, you need to update it in 3-4 years. When you will update it, this time include double materiality. And you will include this financial approach because double materiality, even though guidelines are published, etc., some videos, some training, etc., but it's still complicated. Because it's still, the most complicated is to ask suppliers what is the financial impact of this topic on the company. In the sector of the transport, for example, let's talk about buses. You can have all kinds of customers. They know this process, etc. So you're asking them how passenger safety can affect financial results. It's not as obvious as it seems. So please, if you are not required to do double materiality, start with materiality. And in the second one, include double materiality. And the last one, and not the least, is that don't wait until the official update. For example, I will do the update in 5 years or 4 years to update your priorities. If you have some feedback, even though they are not official, from your employees, from your suppliers, etc., you should update your materiality and you should update your results. Do not wait until the official update to update the results because your action plan will depend mainly on this.
Can you share an example where a transport company has successfully implemented the results of their materiality assessment?
I have two examples. One example I have from internet is for the Maersk company, the globe shipping company. We know Maersk, it's very known. Maersk conducted a materiality assessment and identified decarbonization as one of the top priorities for their stakeholders. Almost all stakeholders rated decarbonization as priority for them. They say, okay, now our stakeholders are expecting from us to do this. So how we can respond to them? So we need to publish an official commitment to achieve net zero emissions. And effectively, they are committed to net zero emission by 2040. Even though they publish this commitment, they also publish and they communicate how they will achieve these objectives. Yes, they communicate how they will achieve these objectives. For example, they will introduce some carbon neutral fuels, they will invest in green methanol-powered vessels, etc. So concretely, how they will achieve this objective. One thing that makes me very proud of this company is that they do not address only environmental concerns, but they want to say, okay, we are one of the leaders of our sectors. We need to be also a leader of our sector in terms of sustainability. We are not leader in business also, but we need to be leader in sustainability. So how we can combine these two and will be very known about this. And they conduct some survey with their stakeholders to say if they also perceived from them as a leader in terms of sustainability. The second example, a company I have known, they started operating with the tramway. And then they will say, okay, we need to ensure that we are committed to sustainability, etc., etc. So they did a lot of action plan. They conduct also the materiality assessment, etc. They were not required to do it because of regulations, etc. This approach was very internal to them. The management was committed, and their shareholders were committed, etc. And after this, 3 years later, the city called them and say, we are proud of you, and we want from you to handle also the buses. You did very good experience with the truck, and because you were not sustainability was not mandatory for you, and you didn't. You succeed in terms of business, you succeed in terms of sustainability, and you are one of the example we need to share to our city, and we want you to handle the buses. And this is one of the beautiful experience they have. Yes.
What are the common pitfalls or challenges that companies face when conducting materiality assessments?
Yes, we should say it. Materiality assessment is not experience that has only good results or good practice, but also they have some challenges, they have some obstacles, they have some very important challenges. So I will say the first one is lack of stakeholder engagement, because materiality assessment, we are repeating the same thing: stakeholders. So when you are not engaging with stakeholders, and all of them, and even though the ones you are not comfortable with, the ones who can say some negative things about your company, etc., you should do include it. The second thing, of course, after stakeholders, data. So you need to ensure that your data are consistent in terms of quality, in terms of accuracy, etc. So you need to verify your data, because unreliable data may cause some bias in terms of results of these materiality assessments. The third one, I will say, depending on your sector. For example, we are in the transport sector. What are the trends? Even though, for example, I am not, for example, as a company, I don't have, for example, this kind of vehicles, etc. But I see that the market trends are going through this. I need to include it. I need to be proactive in my approach. I need to be aware of what is happening in the markets, and not being like my company, my stakeholders, etc. What is happening in the markets, doesn't affect me. The fourth one, I will say resources internally. You need to have the management with you because you will have a lot of resources needed. So they need to allocate you some resources. So this is very important. And all the projects in the company that can involve many departments, etc., need the support of the management. If you don't have the commitment of the management, you cannot succeed this experience. And the last one, time effort. It may look simple, but trust me, they will take a lot of effort from you. Just collecting the data internally. Just, for example, one example, you will ask the department of, for example, suppliers. They will say, please provide us some supplier we can meet. You can wait, and you need to ask them, etc. So please be aware that you will need time, and you will be, even though you are, for example, a sustainability team or you are department, you cannot do it by yourself. You need the other department. So time and resources are needed.
How do you see the role of materiality assessments evolving within the transport sector over the next 5 to 10 years?
I will say, first of all, the double materiality. Because now CSRD will be implemented very, very, very soon. So now we are 2025. So CSRD is, and CSRD is not limited only to European companies. So we need to focus on that. Even though I am not a European company, but who knows? Even though I am a beginner, so I start with materiality, but I need to say, okay, I need to go through double materiality. Second one, I will say, okay, we completed this materiality, we have the results. And what about our strategy? So in the coming years, we need to align our strategy to this materiality. So in the next, as you say, next 5-10 years, companies should align their strategy to the results of materiality. It's gonna be like something they need to do if they want to succeed in this. And the third one, I would say that this materiality is something we know from like 15, 20 years from now, and it's moving, and it's a dynamic process. So we need to be attentive, and we need to say that instead of a periodic assessment of materiality each time for 5-3 years, companies may adopt like real time or to be iterative approach. So I will not wait until 5 years to update my materiality assessments, but companies in the coming years need to be attentive what is happening in their ecosystem and update the results regularly and not wait, because we are moving fast and very fast. So we cannot wait until 4 or 5 years. And the last one, I will say, if possible, because I know we can be idealistic, industry collaboration. If we can have this collaboration between companies, even though we are competitors, etc., we can share some best practices and we can have really some good results. But who knows?
Yeah, I think co-opetition is what it's called. Cooperation with competitors is going to be very important in the future. What emerging trends or technologies do you think will have the biggest impact on materiality assessments in transportation moving forward?
I will say the first one, but it's not limited to transport. It's almost all sectors that are affected, is digitalization. Big data, AI, etc., will impact transport sector. Yeah. Some studies show that almost half of all the job description will be removed by 2040. So the transport sector is not the one that will be not impacted by this. So the first one is digitalization. The second one, I will see decarbonization. Because in one hand, we still have the number of vehicles increasing over time. And the other hand, we have like GHG emissions increasing. So how we can stop increasing GHG emissions and we have increasing the numbers of vehicles. So we need to think about decarbonization. It's very important. And aside from decarbonization, we need to think about climate change. Yes, because climate change is not only GHG emissions. So this climate change, the transport sector is one of the key sectors worldwide that can help in this. The fourth one, I would say, is supply chain transparency. Supply chain transparency will improve the traceability of materials and emissions across supply chains. Because even though I said the second one is, for example, decarbonization, but the transport company cannot succeed in this field by her own. Every company needs its suppliers. So if the suppliers don't play the game, if suppliers are not committed in this, you cannot succeed. Even especially that now, when we are talking about, for example, GHG, we are scope 1, scope 2, your direct emissions, but scope 3, your indirect emissions. Indirect emissions, you have suppliers, which are very present. Yeah. And the last one, I will say, it's not for the transport sector only, but other sectors as well, circular economy. We need to think that's how we can reduce waste and maximize resources. Because our Earth planet do not have endless resources. So we need to think about these life cycle assessments and how we can reduce waste. And especially that now we are, even though the number of people worldwide is increasing, so we need more resources and we need more. So how we can live together with the same resources and waste, etc. So circular economy is becoming also one of the trend, emerging trend in the transport sector.
And I think circularity is also key for the future.
Exactly. Yeah.
What advice would you give to transport industry leaders who are thinking to implement materiality assessments within their organizations, and how can VECTRA International help them?
To successfully implement materiality assessments, there are some steps to follow. And as VECTRA, we can assist you for all these steps, or we can assist you in the steps that you need help with them. So the first one is, as I said, starting with clear objectives. Why you are doing this materiality assessments? Define what you want to achieve. For example, where is its compliance with regulation, improving ESG performance, identifying risk opportunities, etc. So you need to be consistent and you know what you want. This is the first step. The second step, of course, engaging with stakeholders. So you need to involve a diverse range of stakeholders. I will say, for example, regulators, investors, employees, customers, suppliers, communities, employees representative, if you have unions, for example, media, NGOs, etc. So all the stakeholders may have very added value for your assessments. The third one is leverage and established frameworks. What standard you will use? It's gonna be DRI, SFD, SSB, or you will mix them, or for example, when you defined why we are doing this in the first step, for example, we are under CSRD, so you need to follow CSRD, etc. So you need to have a guideline for these projects. The first step gonna be ideally you need to invest in data and technology. For example, use some digital tools to collect data, etc. We cannot nowadays use paper questionnaire. You cannot. So at least you can use some tools, some IT tools that will help you, or data platforms in collecting, analysis, etc. You can have some tools that provide you with real-time information, etc. So this is very, very important. The next one, depending on where you are located and what is the size of company and what is the level of maturity you have, to focus on double materiality or to start with materiality. If you are a beginner, start with materiality to have this exercise, the process, etc. And then you can go for double materiality, because assessing both financial impacts and importance of external impacts on your company, it's not very, very easy as it seems, especially for your stakeholders. So start with materiality, simple materiality. If it's your first exercise, in order to have some results that are good and more basis. And then you can go for double materiality. And I will also add in the step, I will say how we can make this process innovative and how we can make it proactive, and not wait until the next exercise to redo the materiality assessments. And after, I will say communication about this process. You need to communicate, because you engage your stakeholders, and stakeholders are expecting results. You ask them what you will prioritize of this and why, what is the financial impact they may have, etc., etc. So at least they need some communication about the results. So please communicate transparently in this process. You will say, for example, you will share the findings, you will share the process, etc., etc. Because you need to build trust with stakeholders, because you will have to update this process. So in order for your stakeholders to be engaged the next time, you need to trust this, you need to build this trust with them. And the last one, please include in your mind, on your process, this continuous improvements, because we have our result of materiality assessments, but we need to have like a dynamic process, because we need to be aware of new trends, new technologies, new regulations, etc. We will not wait until 4 years and we say, okay, for the last 5 years, what we missed, or what are the new regulations. We need to be as proactive as we can, and collaborative also is the key to succeed this project. And VECTRA, as a consultant, we can help you all in all these steps. We can help you to clear and identify your objectives. We can help you to identify your stakeholders, and identify not only stakeholders that you are dealing with them directly in terms of relationship, etc., because we need to think out of the box. We can assist you to define the questionnaire. We can facilitate the workshop, the interviews, etc. We can provide you some tools, IT tools, to collect the data, to analyze the results, etc. And then, the last but not the least, we can provide you with our added value to analyze and interpret the results. And the results of this materiality assessment, how after they will affect your strategy, they will affect your action plan, etc. And the last thing gonna be, we can also help you to communicate the results of this materiality assessment. So if you need any help for the steps to conduct this materiality, we'll be glad to help you for all the steps or for some steps that you need somehow.
That's great. So VECTRA is here to help companies and their materiality assessments, and not just for the transportation industry, but for all industries. Thank you very much, Zineb. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.